All right. All of you freedom-loving boys and girls, wherever you are in the world, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. Wherever you are watching or listening to this, you are part of the resistance. You are the resistance, for the love of God. You are the resistance. This is episode 39. I don't know if we're going to title this, time to be kinetic or sharpen your mind and your body. Something to that nature. This is kind of a follow-up to an episode we did 2 weeks ago, having to do with some of the things that we think you should start like learning or, how to be better prepared. Well, this is going to focus on some more of the physical. I don't want to call it kinetic because that's not necessarily what we're talking about, but there is a kinetic aspect to this. So as always, one of your hosts, I'm Mark, and then over there,
Redbeard.
And then we've got our little trio, Yeah, we got Patrick and DB, the non-suspicious former CIA guy, with us. And so before we get into the gist or the heart of tonight's podcast, again, which is we're going to try to take this next hour and a half and talk about, we obviously aren't here. We can't teach you skills. We can talk about some skills. Maybe there's some things that we might be able to teach you. But the reason I'm calling this Sharpen Your Mind is our guest here tonight, and then Redbeard and myself, we actually had another one, but he was doing family stuff because he screwed up last night. But anyway, we won't throw him under the bus. We won't call him by name. But we're going to talk, that's going to be a little bit more of the physical side of being prepared and preparedness. But as always, we do our little mad minute, down and dirty. Redbeard, because kind of the way the Hollywood squares are, you're kind of my little viewpoint. You're the next one over clockwise. We'll go you, David, Patrick, and then back up to me. That makes sense. So why don't you go ahead, Redbeard, tell us. You got 1 minute, 60 seconds. What's got you wound up here today?
So it's actually really stupid, but it's going to be a gripe that I'll make. And my gripe is simply the fact that I went to go and buy firearm cleaning products, and it absolutely rubs me the wrong way how expensive this stuff is. But I can tie that into gas. I can tie that into just about every commodity that we have today. It is unbelievably expensive, exorbitant in price. I personally, there's not really much of a reason for it other than the fact that, look, it's when you look at the currency and you look at what our dollar buys and you look at all of the different systems that are in place, whether it's the Fed Reserve or otherwise, it's all intertwined. And but yeah, no, to me, I hated the fact that I paid $60 for 3 items. So, but look, I'm here to tell you, when a guy has a preference to the company he goes through, then I'm kind of a victim of myself. So I'll yield the floor. Oh, you're muted, Mark.
That's the way it should be always in my life. A face for radio and a voice for silent film. Anybody got a response to Redbeard? No.
Costs are part of my life, man. With 2 boys eating 4 meals plus a day, not to count snacks and protein and everything else I can't afford these days.
Yeah, right.
Feel that one.
Well, my response is going to be just simply from, I run my own small business, and to Jeremy's point, like, I haven't raised my prices in years, and yet inflation being what it is, all of my costs are going up. So, in basic, economics 101, like if it's costing you like X amount more for your materials, but then your prices got to go up, but then the market's going to dictate if you drop it. I mean, like, we'll save that for maybe something that comes up in housekeeping for what we're going to talk about next week. But yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, at some point in time, things are going to become so expensive, Jeremy, that and David, I think you're already kind of alluding to that, dude, it used to cost you $100 to feed 4 people for a week. Now it's maybe 200 and 250, okay.
I don't even want to continue.
Yeah, I saw that look on your face. Like,
200. Where do I sign up for that one?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
All right,
go back
David,
about 20 years.
I screwed this up last week. I'm not going to miss you, even though somebody gave a response and I thought that was their 1 minute. You got 1 minute, sir. What do you want to talk about? What's pissing you off in the world?
Not much.
Or not pissing you off, but what do you think people need to be paying attention to?
Oh, I don't know. I I just take everything in. I just went to San Francisco for a work meeting, and I was more disappointed. I wanted to go actually into the city instead of just staying on the highway to get to the place we were going. And I wanted to get some potentially viral videos, not viral like what you'd get in San Francisco, but videos of people breaking into cars or everything else that's going on in San Francisco. Because over here in Reno, that's all coming this way. Since we're only a few hours away from San Francisco and California in general, everybody's moving over to our side of the woods. So big winter's coming. So I guess the homeless are going to struggle with that. But anything bad happening in San Francisco, it's always on its way here. So maybe that pisses me off.
Well, or maybe that's foreshadowing to anyone out in your neck of the woods to start paying attention and getting ready for things to get a little, as Redbeard likes to say, a little spicy.
A little spicy. And just real quick to you, David, in our area of Duluth, we get it from two directions. We get it from down by the Twin Cities and Chicago and Detroit. So everybody loves to come here and destroy everything nice that we have. So it's I feel you, man. I do.
Oh, we have Lake Tahoe, probably one of the most beautiful lakes in the world, and I haven't seen it in years because it's so overpopulated with tourists, and it's not even worth going to see anymore. That's how bad it's gotten.
Well, just to kind of bring this over to Patrick, but there's a difference between like overpopulated with tourists, because that's good for your local economy, as to the overpopulated with criminal elements, or like Canal Park, here, it used to be a great place, and it was always overpopulated with tourists, but now it's also overpopulated with drug needles and homeless in camp,
human trafficking.
All right. Let's move this over to Patrick. Just smiled on that. He might actually talk about that a little bit tonight. We'll see if he does or not. It's up to him. Patrick, you're up.
Hey, thanks, guys. Yeah. Let's see. I'd go ahead and go off of what Dave was just saying. I was out in Tucson recently for a work event, and there was extremely, I guess we'll call it healthy population of homeless, in addition to all the migrants that have come across. And as I was flying back home, I had several of them get on a flight, because everything there transits through like Dallas and then goes onward from there. So I'm looking around thinking like, which one of these, just all it takes is one that's ill intentioned. And then, that's on a plane, the groups that are coming across, mostly, to use our old phrase, military age males, that's very concerning. So I think that feeds the why. And it's just a daily thing that through my work, I get to get the front row seat to, that I kind of wish I didn't have. So, our previous lines of work, there's a large part of me that just wants to put that stuff to rest and, start fishing and, doing just relaxing stuff. But it's kind of a constant reminder, like, hey, man, you better kind of keep those skills sharp, because you never know when you're going to need them.
And that's one of the main, that's actually kind of is the main focus of our podcast tonight, as Patrick just said. Great segue, sir. Keeping those skills sharp. I think as another segue into the actual meat of the podcast, and I'll just say something on a personal note, and most of these guys have already heard it from me, or they've had a beer with me. We've talked about it, but to Patrick's point, I just wanted to like retire and just like start a business and take it easy. And my body's falling apart from all the shit I did for 30 years. So why not give me 30 years of like being able to relax? I don't think that's in the cards for us, boys. I don't think that's the way life is going to go. And I don't want to get too deep into that. I think we're going to save that, and this will come up in the housekeeping. I think we'll save that for maybe next week, but I just don't see how people of our age, our generation, we don't get out of this without getting hurt. I don't want to be the negative guy, but I just don't see, well, here, I'll just say it. I think the best that we're going to hope for, Patrick, along those lines, I think the best we're going to see again in our lifetimes is maybe the Obama era economics. And if you were alive back then and paying attention, how that was horrible. I mean, that was just a horrible time. Your money was worthless. You lost a shit ton of money in your 401s or the housing market, all that. I think that's maybe the best that we're going to have to look forward to. And I know that's kind of glum. We'll cover that a little bit later, maybe next week. But I like where you're going, because I think that your final comment, that segues nicely into what we're talking about. You're not going to be able to just like, all right, it's the next generation's fight. I carried the water for 10, 20, 30 years, whatever it was. Now it's time to be a contributing member of my society and raise a family. I just don't see that happening, everyone. So, tonight's episode, we're going to sit and talk about some of the things that require your physicality, a certain physical dimension. If you want to be able to ride out the storm or be better prepared for what's coming, again, I'd gladly put a tinfoil hat on and people can make fun of me 6 months or a year from now. I hope that's the case. I really do. Only one of us can be right. I hope it's you, that person saying these guys are fucking retards. But unfortunately, I don't think that's the case. I think we're on it. So before we jump into that, a couple little pieces of housekeeping. Jeremy, if you're okay with that, can I do the housekeeping real quick?
Yep, go for it.
Well, actually, and you can add into this too. So I just was alluding to it. So here's the housekeeping I'll bring up, and then Jeremy can talk about kind of next year what we're looking at doing. But next week, and this is going to be hard to determine because of Jeremy's schedule and if it snows, right? And Jeremy's work schedule and all that. But tentatively right now, we're looking at, I think that's the 29th, Friday of next week. We're going to do a live stream, and it's going to be a year in review. We're going to sit and look at everything we've talked about, challenge ourselves. Did we get that right? Did we get that wrong? Did we mess that up completely? Or is it still to be determined type of thing? We'll sit and talk about that. We'll have a couple guests on. And if you're watching it live, be able to comment. Maybe you come on the live stream and join us, give your comment or whatever the case is. We'll have a couple little drinky drinks, and have it more of that open-ended, open forum format type of, and we'll do it as a live stream. That'll be kind of the last thing that we do this year. But this is the last of the podcast. Now, Jeremy, do you want to do that other little bit of housekeeping right now? Just knock it out.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you're talking about how we're doing our formats, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So basically, for anybody that watched our previous episode, you'll kind of already have an idea of what the format is that we're going to go with. But essentially, after getting some feedback and after taking an evaluation of a lot of different things that both some of our guests have said, but at the same time that people have reached out to Mark and myself have mentioned as well. We took a look back and we evaluated our previous episodes like way in the beginning, and then we looked at what we were doing right today, as it stands. And what we're going to be doing format wise is we are going to be taking essentially the standard or the way that we did it in the beginning, which was significantly more structured, but it still left a little leeway. And we're going to mash that up and create a symbiotic relationship with some of the ways that we do it currently, which means we're still going to keep the Mad Minute, and it should be able to help keep our podcast down to an hour and a half, hour 45 at maximum. That way we can provide to you guys and gals a far more digestible podcast. It'll be something that you guys can sit down and listen to and not feel overwhelmed. And when the next episode comes around, you'll be able to pick it up and continue moving forward. That being said, we are planning to switch up the days down the road that we're going to be doing the podcast. So we're going to be shooting on Tuesday, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. And so that episode should be out, I believe, within a day or two, roughly.
I'll have it out. I'll have it out the following morning. So we shoot it on Tuesday. So, I'll have it published on Wednesday. Yep.
Yeah. So it'll be a pretty quick turnaround time. And then what we'll do is we're going to do kind of a stagger every other week. We'll have 1 week to where we do a shorter, more directed conversation. That'll be about 30 to 45 minutes. We'll have one of our guests come in, and they'll be very much on a particular topic that they can expound upon. We'll ask some questions after they kind of say their piece, and that way it gives you something a little bit more substantive. The opposite week that we would do, so we would do a live version, which is going to be a little bit longer. It's all depending, but it may go for a regular hour and a half, or it might go for a longer duration of 3 hours. But it will really allow you guys and gals to be able to put in your input and be able to respond to us real time. And, Mark and whomever might be able to enjoy in some libations. So it'll be a good podcast. We can get a little off the rails, and we can just kind of take it in the direction that we want without any structure. So.
Yeah, that's it right there. And then on that note, we're thinking Friday of next week. That's the game plan. Yep. Friday of next week will be our first live stream and for Mission Critical Podcast, and it'll be a year in review type of thing. So stay tuned. Again, unfortunately, it's a little bit dependent on Jeremy's schedule. If it's not Friday 1700 Central Standard Time next week, if there's a scheduling change, I'll do a short little video and I'll announce like, hey, we're going to do this on Thursday, or we're going to do it on Saturday. We'll figure that out. It actually just boils down to snow. It's what it boils down to. I know that's a weird thing for some people to hear, like, snow dictates your podcast. Snow is going to dictate our podcast. So ho, ho, ho. All right. On that note, let's jump into it. I'm kind of looking forward to this. This is the last official podcast of the year. We've done 39 of them so far. And this one, I'll just a little bit of bullshit here. I'll take us down just a small rabbit hole. Before we start, we were going to have Triple X on tonight. As I just mentioned, he actually has some family things that kind of popped up. But Triple X had talked some shit to me earlier in the week and sent me a meme, and I was like, "There's no way that's true, right?" And then in our pregame, everybody here was like, "Oh no, that's actually." I'm like, "There's no effing way." So on that note, I think that even though that seems like the subject itself, changing the state flag of your state, that seems to be more on a political level. I think it is nothing more than I hate to say a great example, but just a very strong example. How about that? Of you better start looking around. Look to your left, look to your right, figure things out. What are you doing? Who's around you? What's your backdrop? What is the environment you're operating in? And so on that note, we lost Triple X, who's got a lot of hands-on skills right now that he's doing more in the shooting and the driving world, but everybody else here has a lot of those same skills. I mean, honestly, Patrick probably has from your side on the agency, a lot of that same stuff that George was going to talk about tonight. But that's why we've got David and Patrick here, and then Redbeard as well. I'll chime in with a little bit about my background and some of the things that I think. 2 weeks ago we talked about a group of people having a network, having what you hear people talk about, whether you want to call it a tribe or whatever you want to call it. But you're never going to do this by yourself. I mean, that's just impossible, right? Like, good luck with that, John Wayne. Tell me where you're going to be so I can be somewhere else, right? So that was more about, learning how to cook, canning food, growing crops, raising chickens. It was more about that kind of stuff, which is long-term sustainability. Tonight is actually more about your physical safety. I mean, is that a fair way of saying it, Redbeard?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that's roughly what the conversation is about, whether it's your physical safety or the physical safety of your family, or even the physical safety of your property. There's a lot that you can expound upon there. So
right. So again, we've got an hour and a half. This isn't meant to be a hands-on class. I think you just need to listen to what these guys have to say, and you'll put a couple good little pocket, some gems in your pocket, and go home with them. So where do we want to start? Redbeard, do you want to kind of start, or should we just come right around the horn, go to David and start with David? Actually,
yeah, I can. I was going to say I can just start off real quick,
okay.
and then just try and drive a direction anyways.
Okay.
So, when we talk about the physicality of things, there's a couple points I'll bring up that hopefully these fine gentlemen will be able to expound upon and provide some elaboration. But the first thing, and I've hounded on it numerous times, I know that it's something that can come across wrong, but it's not wrong. It's just reality. To whereas, like, if you're not going to be fit, your chances of sustaining your own life is significantly decreased. You've got to have and invite some realm of like physical activity into your life. You've got to be mobile. You've got to be capable physically. You don't have to be, you don't have to be a Dorian Yates bodybuilder type person. Very few people. Well, I'm not going to discredit our viewers, but if you know who Dorian Yates is, he's very.
Move it on.
Yeah. So
you could have said Arnold Schwarzenegger and everybody would have known that name, but you had to
yeah, I know.
But that was one of our biggest criticisms. We're too esoteric.
But the point is like, you don't have to be a hyper athlete. You just got to be capable, right? So there's a lot of like function things that you should consider. Like, are you able to squat? Are you able to jump? Are you able to run? Are you able to lift things? Like in making sure you understand what your capabilities are and what your limitations are. Now, I would also say, go ahead. You're muted, by the way, Mark.
Can I just say one thing? And because I kind of want to give Patrick a chance to, before you move too far past the physical capabilities, because I'm here to tell you, boys and girls, I'll throw myself under the bus. Look, if it wasn't for modern medicine and what Jeremy's talking about, under real survival circumstances, I would have probably died 2 years ago, with my back and my hips, my ability. I can't carry an 80-pound ruck. I can't drop trees. I can't cut firewood. So, and now that had to do with my physical limitations. So to Jeremy's point, but then you've got to also look at physical limitations isn't just because you had hip surgery or back or rotator cuff or whatever the thing is. It's also like, do you have the physical skills? Have you been working and practicing and doing this stuff? And Patrick, I know this is something that you're very passionate about. So before you go too much farther, Jeremy, I know Patrick's going to have a little something to add to that. Sure. Patrick, sorry to throw you under the bus, but I know this is something that you're passionate about. So.
Yeah, thanks. Well, so Redbeard kicked it off, and that's right. Getting moving and taking care of your physical, being first of all is kind of the step in the right direction, because we talked about this a long time ago, but like a lot of people's conception of violence is some kind of like contrived, set up, choreographed type thing, like in a martial arts, studio, or on a flat range or whatever, whenever ideal conditions, right? That's not reality. Reality is, things are going to happen when you're at your worst. When I've had the worst night's sleep, maybe I've got to take a crap. Maybe I already worked out, all these different factors. That's when it occurs. So the mentality and what you carry around all the time is really what's going to make the difference. What Mark was referring to as far as the skills go, I honestly believe that no matter what your physical condition is, that you've got to have the mindset to actually engage in an encounter and protect yourself. One of the things I often ask people, and hey, you guys feel free to jump in on this too, is, who are you to the rest of the world? We tend to get caught in our own, day-to-day business and that type of stuff. But I'll go ahead and take a pause. Mark, you're muted. Mark, you're muted.
Mark.
I'm always looking at too many different things, but I got to mute myself too. But Patrick, I'm sorry. I want to bring it back to Jeremy so he finished his thought. But I wanted you to highlight what he was getting, and I know you're going to go into greater detail. That's why I was like, let's just say that we come to you. Because God bless you, but you just said it right there. And what I love, and when I was teaching, if you remember Patrick way back in the day, one of the things, even in like the first 72, or the 72 hours afterwards, like, well, I still to this day get people asking me, because I make outdoor gear. Well, what about? I'm like, dude, that's like asking me, what's that line from a movie? You're asking me how a watch is made. Like, dude, there's so many components and so many issues here. I don't know any of that stuff. So let's just slow that down, But please, seriously, Patrick, when we come back to you, let's bring that back up, because I think that is such one of the first stepping stones, or the first building blocks is you got to know who the hell you are first before you can ask, why are you watching this guy or studying this guy? You can't even move your hand forward like that. So what does that even matter? That's a bad example, but all right, Redbeard, back over to you, sir.
Yeah. So I'm just going to kind of wrap it up saying this, like Mark, you hit on the skills. Patrick did a very good job of elaborating on what I've already mentioned. And I just want to mention real briefly here, look, maintenance of the body and maintenance of the mind is extremely important. And, I feel like there's this realm to where people will forego the maintenance of their tools. Like, you have tools that you use to work, but if you're not upkeeping your tools, then it becomes very expensive, not by way of cost all the time, but by way of time, by way of having to go out and get something else, by way of having to not be as effective. And so I want to just put out there, if you need to maintenance your body, you need to maintenance your mind, but you also need to learn how to maintenance your tools. Okay. Tools are some of the most resourceful things that we have. And whether it's a firearm, whether it's a knife, whether it's whatever that is, or
whether it's your chainsaw.
Right. And that's the biggest thing is like, look, like we have got to get back into a culture to where we're not afraid to maintenance our things in order to have longevity, in order to extend the life of it, in order to be as effective as we possibly can be. And I'll end it on this, Mark. There are so many people that I know that either do not like to maintenance or clean their own firearms or understand how to put an edge back on a knife. And if you're not willing to learn how to do that, then usually those people are also the same people that don't want to maintenance their bodies and maintenance their mind either. And so you're starting from a level of detraction versus where you could be, which is a couple steps ahead. So I'll leave it to you, gentlemen. You're muted, Mark.
I just said,
you're going to figure it out eventually.
Yeah, I'll get it. So I'll get it one day, boys and girls. But on your note, and before we come down to David and Patrick,
yeah,
it's also like, think your vehicle, like, and when the inflation being what it is, and Bidenomics being as awesome as it is, but you can't even afford a brake change. But if you learned how, it's not that hard. Seriously, it's not that difficult. You have, and I was starting to do some cooking stuff. I'm going to start doing more cooking stuff. There's no excuse for any man or woman to not know how to cook basic freaking meals. I mean, there just isn't, right? But that goes to your point, Jeremy. We've become, well, it's just so much easier for me to get takeaway or whatever. And then that's awesome if you have the money and the ability to do that, or to go to a garage or whatever. But it comes to a point where it's like, you should know how to do that yourself, because that garage might be closed. You might need to do it right then and there. Your children need to eat, I mean, and your money doesn't go as far anymore.
And if I can just real quick go just off of what you just said, like, I do believe that there is a correlation between people's ability to maintenance things they already have and maintaining themselves. So we have this system of convenience and it's super easy, and I can just send this to somebody else and I can sit on the couch and become fat and lazy and not do anything. And it's like, it's not saying convenience isn't good, but it's created a structure that's detrimental to who we are. So
as we turn it over to these guys, the thought that came through my brain is like, yeah, but I'm the world's best video gamer, and I just sit on my, like, come on, man, so once the balloon goes up and all this shit goes away, but I'm a lawyer, or I'm the world's best video gamer. Yeah. Won't those skills carry me through, through the bad times? David, Patrick, I mean, seriously, I'm a lawyer. That's all I need to know. That'll get me through everything, right?
You might know how to swindle some people.
Oh, okay, touche. I did not see that. That was pretty good. That actually could be a good skill, until somebody wises up and shoots.
I'll buy that for $1.
Yeah, there you go. All right, David and Patrick, who wants to go first?
I could just follow up on a little bit of what Redbeard was saying. So one of the things is, and we all have these friends in our social groups who like to talk, especially when it comes to these topics about protecting our families, protecting ourselves, the guys who are out there shooting all the time as enthusiasts. I just happen to have a lot of friends who like to talk the talk. Not very many who can walk the walk, right? And it's not just about being a good shooter or being well-versed in your firearms. I'm just using one example, but kind of what Redbeard's talking about, the physicality as well. Are you able to lift X amount of weights? Are you, when shit hits the fan, we're going to have to be building things. We're going to have to be moving things. We're going to have to be using our physical health. And I get it when there's disabilities from injuries, whatever, but a lot of the issues I see are less to do with accidents or natural disability and more to do with the laziness, the sitting on the couches. So the guys who are talking the talk kind of drives me insane when I know they can't walk the walk when the shit hits the fan, right? And that's kind of that's all I'm thinking about when Redbeard's talking to these guys. I'm just thinking, of these guys I know who can't get themselves anywhere. They're overweight, or they can't run a mile, or something simple as those things purely because of their lifestyle choices. And that's not going to help us as a community, as a people, as a population when the shit does hit the fan eventually, right? Those are the guys who are going to struggle quite a bit. And we're already going to have to protect those of us who aren't able to, take care of themselves, the children, the ladies, people who already have handicapped type needs, disabilities, but not through their choice, right? We don't need all that dead weight of people who talk the talk, but don't walk that walk, and it's just a pet peeve of mine, just a huge pet peeve of that Redbeard got me. Just my brain's going like, oh my God, these guys drive me insane. So,
but that's a great pet peeve to have. And again, we haven't even come to you guys for your real points. And we're going to bring this over to Patrick next, because Patrick and I have a history. And on that point, and I'm glad you said it, like, there's one thing, I'm physically broken. I'm not mentally broken at all. I'm physically broken, but I'm getting better. And that mental thing, I'll again, a little like, oh, look at me, but my nurses and my doctors, everybody's like, oh, are you, like, as you're getting ready to go to surgery, they're like, are you apprehensive? Are you nervous? They're trying to like calm you down. I'm like, oh, hell no. I'm not going to racehorse in the whatever they call that, where they first start off, the hurdles or the channel or whatever. I'm ready to go. I'm like, let's get this surgery going. I want to get back where I can then start losing weight and I can start being physical again and doing things. I think so. To David, your point, that there's a huge distinction there. It's like, I want to do it, but I'm physically incapable of doing it because of the physical things, right? Like, again, you got a rotator cuff injury, like, okay, well then, but if you're physically, okay, I can't do that the same thing. So I'm not going to like focus my physical fitness on relying on my right side or shooting right side or defending or striking from the right side. I'm going to find ways to work within the confines of my physical capabilities, right? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah. And my point is also that, when it comes down to it and we have to rely on each other as that community, it will be like my responsibility to carry some of that load for you, but it's not because you're lazy. It's because you're, like you said, broken, where my issue is carrying the load for the people who are lazy. And it's not just, and that's the thing I always see is this guy's not going to get my back. I was going to go hunting with somebody who I wasn't quite sure if he could carry the load. If I got injured, I'm screwed. He has to leave me there, right? He can't take me back. And that's the kind of things that go through my mind is, if you aren't physically able to help me, I'm not going to be physically able to help you either. And that's no good for any of us, especially when we're protecting our communities, when we got to take care of our families and the older folks and everybody else who really needs it. We don't have time for the people who chosen to be part of that.
As Patrick, coming over to you, what David's saying, what's going through my brain right now, Redbeard, I think I saw you as he was full screen. You were kind of nodding as well. I think this might be the same thing. Don't want to speak for you, but it's that bullshit ego, right? And David, is that a fair thing? Like, in other words, there's some people who just let their ego get in the way. I remember teaching a class to a bunch of judges, and this one judge kept talking about, oh, he could take on 2 to 3 guys. And I'm like, dude, I've been in one fight with 2 guys. Twice in my life, I've been in a fight with 2 guys. Once I won, the other time I didn't win. The only time I won is because those guys were shitty fighters. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that ego is what's going to get people in trouble. Is that kind of a fair kind of way of bringing it up a little bit?
A little bit, you know, and I mentioned the talk because probably your viewers are broader social circles. The people that we know and spend our time with are probably similar when it comes to talking to talk. They're interested in these type of things, security, personal security, etc. It doesn't mean that just because they share the same values, same views, and all these things doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to walk that walk. And that's where we need to be all on the same page. It needs to be a value system that we have to not only be proficient in things that make us men, right? You know, weaponry or self-defense, but physically as well. So we could actually do the job that needs to be done when it needs to be done. And that should be part of our value system as well. Sound mind, sound body, the whole way.
Yeah. Redbeard just gave you the 2 thumbs up. I'm going to echo that.
Great.
And I know this is something that Patrick is incredibly passionate about. Like, Patrick, can I tell one small personal story that we still haven't resolved to this day about ruck marches? Like, so Patrick knew me when I was getting ready. I was in 20th group. It's a National Guard Special Forces group, and I was getting ready to go to selection. And Patrick, I don't know, should I say did we ever say where we first knew each other? I mean, in the military? Well, you know, I'll leave it up to you to say that. But all I'm just trying to say is Patrick and I were doing a bunch of stuff physically. I was doing stuff physically. And then, you know, our lives moved on. And then, you know, here we are reconnecting, you know, 7 years later, and we're still doing physical things. And I remember to this day, Patrick, and I'm smiling, he knows what I'm about to say. He still thinks I was talking shit about some of the times I could do with certain weights in my rucksack. And he's like, that's, you know, whatever. And I'm like, no, I have no reason to lie about that. This is what I'm capable of doing based on what my training and everything I was doing. But so now whether Patrick wants to turn this around and tell his side of the story and his joke, but I want to turn this over to you, Patrick, because I know this is something and again, I'm kind of just having fun at your expense, but I know you're very passionate about this. And of all the people I know in my life, like I would definitely defer to you. Like if somebody wants to start talking about physical fitness from a combat application or just a sustainment application, I'm going to come to you. And especially when it comes even to, like, you know, creating that training regimen. So I'm going to bring it over to you, Patrick, whether you want to throw me under the bus or give your rebuttal to my rucksacking, you know, but
all right.
And those who know what we're talking about know what we're talking about when it comes to ruck marches and stuff. So
yeah, if you've ever carried something heavy on your back for miles on end, 12 plus miles, you kind of you'll understand the pain that's involved in that type of stuff. But you know, to stay on the fun talk here real quick, Mark's got like an X-Man superpower. At some point, you should probably take off your shoes and show the viewers your feet, because there's something off of X-Men. So he's got this unique ability to have like a longer stride somehow, some kind of God-given, mutation that allows him to take longer steps. So he can move out pretty fast, where, you know, I scratch basically 5'8", 5'9". So I've always been one of those guys that had to kind of always, you know, shuffle, you know, the airborne shuffle, or just, you know, kind of like jog a little bit with a ruck. And that's not fun over a distance, but your body, if you do it right and don't hurt yourself, your body can adapt. But anyway, that's the fun talk. Going back to what Dave said, we were kind of talking about that a second ago, the ego thing that comes into people's minds, right? That's great. Pardon my French, I really don't give a shit what somebody else thinks. And nor should anyone else, for that matter. If you're really involved in improving yourself, and I think that's probably the biggest, if we had to encapsulate what we're talking about, self-reliance is it. Just start thinking about, hey, what do I need to improve? Take an honest assessment of it. Right now I'm in pretty decent shape. I'm in my mid 50s. I can still deadlift 350 pounds. I can bench press 230 pounds, and I can still run within time standards for the military, but it's not fast anymore because there is no such thing as old man speed. So, and I've also had several injuries, and I know that, Mark's had his challenges, and I'm sure everybody else online here has too. When you get those injuries, you have to rehab, you have to come back. So I've always adopted the white belt mentality, like, hey, I'm starting all over again. I have to learn how to run. I have to learn how to step evenly with one foot and the other foot, that type of stuff. So it's something that you have to be intrinsically motivated by. That your body is it's you. It's gonna be your vehicle for life. If you don't take care of that, all the other tools that Redbeard mentioned, whether it's a gun, a knife, whatever, none of that really matters if you don't have the capability to move and actually physically take care of yourself. I'll throw one more thing out there. We had a trainer of ours at the agency that used to have this phrase, and 100% right. It said, "Fighting ain't easy, fighting ain't pretty, and size does matter." So it's very good. It was very good to be well-rounded in our old jobs, but now it's like I mentioned before, it's something that we need to maintain because the threat is real, and you don't get to pick when something goes sideways.
Before I turn it over to Redbeard, I think he's got something to add into it, and and we'll save it for the live stream, to talk smack and tell more of that story. But at the end of the day, though, you're absolutely right. And as you get older, you've got to then reassess what your capabilities are. And this isn't for anybody watching. Anything that we're all saying, I know all of these guys personally, and I can speak for myself. And and maybe I'm only going to do a little better of a job, or not as good of a job for me as what these guys are doing for themselves. But you know what your capabilities are. Like the fastest I ever ran was a 5-mile run. I was doing sub 6-minute miles, and I did that over 5 miles. That's not normal, right? And I was being challenged. It was a buddy of mine. Matter of fact, I'd love to have him on a podcast one time too. But long story short, it was back in that day when to what we're all talking about. And I think, we're what are we? Yeah, we're 30 minutes into this conversation, this part of the not quite 30 minutes into this part of the conversation. And look at how much we've talked about physical fitness. So yeah, I can't do that anymore. I'm not running sub 6-minute miles anymore. But to Patrick's point, and when I get healed, I'm going to work my ass off to lose weight and get back to, I don't care if that's an 8-minute mile at that point in time, whatever it's going to be, I'm going to be able to do the best I can at that point. And for all of the cool guy shit that you think you're going to do in zombie apocalypse, if you've got the gut, or if you discount, if you egotistically say, who cares about my back, or who cares about my hip, or who cares about what my wife or my kid, you're going to end up leaving people behind, or you're going to set yourself up for failure. That's all I wanted to add to what Patrick had to say. Now, Redbeard, I know you wanted to add a few things. And here's what I love, and my last comment. Here's what I love about all of you guys. I think subconsciously we all realize that physical fitness is it's the main pillar of all this. Great, you can shoot all day long, but if you can't do that for more than 3 minutes, or you can do this, but if you can't do that and if you can't roll, or if you can't punch or take, what is that? Then what does all that matter? You've got to be physically, and then I'm going to add to this myself later. And when it comes back around to me at the end, it's going to be about mental fitness too. But Redbeard, you, sir.
Yeah. So just real quick off of what Patrick was saying, I remember a couple of years ago, and I let me preface with the point of Patrick talking about that reset, or those white belt moments, because I had an injury several years ago where I severely sprained both my ankles at the same time. I had, for those of you that don't know what a railroad panel is, it's a pre-made panel that you make, and it was about 200 feet long, and I was directing the load, and the load shifted, and unfortunately the swing of that load was much greater than I had anticipated, and basically laid me over, right? And my body fell over, but my ankles didn't. And that was probably, well, first off, I did the ignorant man thing, which is I tightened up my boots and continued to work that day instead of going to seek proper medical help, because I'm a stubborn fool. And but when I got home, I knew that whole ride home, I was like, the worst point of this whole thing is going to be when I take my boots off. And why am I bringing this up? Well, because when I took those boots off and I was sitting on my couch, or on a couch at the time. There's nothing that I think destroys your mentality. You could be the toughest guy in the world. There's nothing that destroys your mentality when you go to stand up and you can't walk on your own. And my ankles were completely destroyed. And so I actually had to have help to go, no kidding, like 5 meters from the couch to the shower. And that was the first time I ever feared that moment that I thought I was going to slip and smack my head or something like that. And to me, that's a type of adversity that, like, we're talking about kinetic, but in the physical realm, but it very much applies, because if you've never been at that point to where you felt so helpless, like there's no recourse, like there's nothing you can do, and you can mentally get yourself to a place to where you continue to move through it. You're not ignorant to your issues, but you can move through it. You can work through it. It pays off, man. And it's like, it was literally the most vulnerable time in my entire life. And I tell you what, 3 months later, the first squat I ever did was absolutely terrifying. And I only had like a 45 on each side or something like that. And I was just like, I'm going to fold over and die. but it's real talk, you know?
But back to the point that I think you made that I loved, and I want to grab out of the air and bring it back to that. It's like, it's that mental attitude, right? Again, so you've got to be physically fit. But each and every one of us is going to encounter physical challenges in our lives as we get older, or if we get injured. Like, if you're out there doing cool guy shit, you're going to get injured. I'm not talking about being shot or anything from like combat. But no matter what, you're going to get injured. Hands are going to get smashed. You're going to get cut. Ankles are going to get rolled. To what you're. So there's that mental side of it as well, that you have to be. See, and that's why the title of this is going to be something about the physical and the mental, because you've got to be, as matter of fact, I almost think that you have to be mentally, you have to be tougher than you have to be physically tough. But don't forget, and I don't want to take away, you have to be physically tough. So Patrick, you can add to this, but I want to come to David, because I think there's something with the mental toughness that I know David and his previous experiences has got probably a good couple stories about mental toughness. But Patrick, no offense to anybody else, but you and I were the guys who were in the military. Remember that whole thing about North Korea? North Korea's been a threat for a long time. But I remember seeing some things saying, it's like, no matter what you did today, don't worry, your enemy did more. I can't remember how that. You remember that little slogan we had? It was to try to motivate you to like train harder, because your enemy's training hard right now too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There was something about a true believer, right? Like somewhere out there's a true believer, and he doesn't care how much his rucksack weighs. He doesn't care how far he's got to go today. And at the end and when he's done training, he doesn't worry about taking a shower and going home. He already is home. Basically, these guys live this stuff, so you better harden up and be able to exceed the enemy's capabilities and basically work your ass off.
Yeah. You're muted, Mark. You're muted.
Jesus. I'm going to start actually, but here's the whole point. Mentally, so we've been doing this for almost 39 episodes now. And I have to start mentally, just like anything from, whatever it is that you're doing. You have to come up with a mantra, and you have to come up with a way of doing it. Yep. I've got to start coming up with this system where before I say anything, or before I even bring anybody back up to the, or to this view, I'm looking at where this button should be and where my cursor is. Yep. It's the same thing. So, it actually, I think it just proves the point. So Patrick's talking about, so this mantra was there, but it had to be about like being physically tough. But as I just demonstrated, you also have to be mentally tough, and you have to get into rhythms, and you have to get into routines, and it's got to be muscle memory. This is still not muscle memory for me. I'm listening to the conversation. I'm looking at everybody. I've got to get muscle memory built in. So if you're the cool guy who you just think you're just going to throw a rucksack on your back and you're going to go out and, and fight zombies, God bless you, John Wayne. You know, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of training and a lot of patience, but it also takes a whole lot of taking the ego out of the equation. Like I've effed this up already 3 times this podcast, and it seems like I F it up like 3 to 5 times every podcast. So it's clearly something that I'm not doing a very good job of, and I have to get better at. So on that note, so fellas, we're at 50 minutes. We haven't even given David and Patrick a chance to sit and talk here. So Jeremy, with your permission, I think we use this as a good segue. We come back down to the bottom of the Hollywood squares, and we let these guys kind of actually take the rest of the podcast. We got another 40 minutes in the direction they want to go. I mean, David can sit in whether you want to. Well, whatever you guys do, what you want to do. But Redbeard, are you okay with that? I'm kind of making an audible right now. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. If I can just say something real quick.
Sure. No, you're on a podcast. You can't say anything.
Yeah, I know it's terrible. No, I just want to emphasize, like, and it's already been overtly emphasized. Like, look, we kind of planned, I think, a couple different ways that we're going to go, but if you guys haven't figured it out yet, like the physical aspect is so important. And like if I hadn't been working out well before my injury a couple of years ago, the rate of recovery would not have been the same. Physicality, dude, like eating right, staying moving, like there's a reason we're emphasizing this so much, because it's good to shoot, it's good to know how to fight, it's good to do all these different things, but in the end of the day, that is such a minute portion of our lives that, like, if you can't do basic things like go up and down stairs or walk from one place to the other or be able to catch your kid as they're running out in the street so they don't get hit by a car, like, dude, like the physical nature of this conversation extends to so many different degrees. It can't be overemphasized. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And I want to let these guys take it when they're ready. So
as we turn it over to both these guys, because of what you just said, the physical fitness side, I just remember taking a class, and Patrick, I don't know if we come to you next or if we go to DB next, but I just remember going through a shooting class. So everybody agree this is not a real handgun?
Yep.
Right. No live rounds. This is a training weapon, right? But as you're sitting here practicing, if we're going to talk about kinetic and different skills, as you're practicing establishing grip and presenting and getting your arms out there in the proper posture. So whether a lot of guys are doing like, red dots and irons. I'm a big believer in point shooting, because that's where we can maybe save that for another time. But like, I don't think, in my personal experience, I've actually on my handgun and everything, I'm my eyes are going where my hands are pointing. But what I'm getting at to Redbeard and everybody else's point is, if you're going to sit and practice these motions, even this training weapon, which is weighted to be like a real weapon, it still weighs something. And the more you do that, the more repetitions, the more you're building up that muscle and that muscle memory. And then as you advance, you're taking a 2.5 pound weight, maybe even a 5 pound weight, because that's what like professional shooters are doing. They're taking weights and they're just pressing up. They're coming in, press, index, press, and they're just training that. So it all becomes a great muscle memory, and they're building up the muscles necessary. So when that comes out in crisis, under duress, it's going to be where it needs to be, and they're going to be able to put freaking rounds in the A box. So on that note, we're taking the physical fitness side of it. That was just a stupid little idea I had based on what Redbeard said, to now bring it over to you guys down below. Take it where you want to go. Patrick, I almost think you should respond first, because that was a little bit of handgun and physical fitness. Not that David's not physically fit. I don't mean it that way, but I know this is a little bit more in the let's see those guns. All right, Patrick, it's to you.
All right. Yeah, thanks. When we're talking about just kind of like the psychological piece, the mind drives everything that the body does. So your mind has to be there first. I mean, that's really it. If you look at your body, and this is a Tony Blauer thing, but refer to it as the human weapon system. Because you've always got you, right? But is your mind engaged? So you could be the best trained guy on the planet. in the best shape. But if your mind is not switched on, you're kind of out of the fight there, and that's not something you want to do. So that needs to be honed. Physical training will help hone that, right? If you're doing it with the purpose to actually, improve your body, but also have a capability for survival, or, to use the big military term lethality, which I think the military is losing out on nowadays. So you develop your own though, right? So you can take certain concepts from the military, from, when I say the military, I'm generally talking about special operations. You can take it from, people that have worked, in the intelligence community, people that actually spend a lot of time, practicing and perfecting the craft. But it all starts with the physical. I will say that, when we would go to the range, after you'd passed the vetting and you'd gone through the, all the hoops and they knew you were safe, going to the range was never just going to the range. Going to the range became a very physical evolution quickly. To the point where you're constantly running, moving, sliding behind cover, jumping over cover, carrying your buddy, dragging your buddy, having them carry you, just so on and so forth. So it was an all-encompassing thing. To hit on the mindset thing real quick, that was really it. If you didn't have that mentality and that sense of urgency to say, hey, you know what? Dave, Mark, Redbeard, you guys might weigh, 60, 70, pounds more than me. But guess what? I have to save your life right now. And I need to have that physical capability. So in my head, I have to switch on and say, I'm moving him now, no matter what. I don't care, what my body is saying. He's getting off this like attack zone right now, because I'm responsible for him. So that comes into play for like day-to-day life, is having that ability to switch that on. And you don't have to go through this type of training to do it. You just have to like mentally rehearse it and just realize that you're capable maybe of more than you know. Now, you don't want to count on I'll get the adrenaline dump and it'll make me do these things. But the adrenaline dump, if you're not used to it, might just completely exhaust you, and you may be worse off than if you didn't have it. So there's a lot that goes into this stuff. So practicing with intent, building and developing skills at a fundamental level, learning how to employ those, in a functional way, right? In a functional way, because I can stand and shoot, a target that's sitting still while I'm nice and calm and got all the time in the world. But if that target starts, shooting back at me, aka the two-way range, well, that's going to change that dynamic quickly. So I need to have that mentality of not saying, hey, okay, front sight, A box, squeeze, trigger. I can't think that. I have to think, shoot this mofo now. And that's really my psychological launch word: shoot this motherfucker now. And that's that's from repetition. I know what I have to say to myself when I'm in a fatigued state to function properly. And I think that people need to once they get their bodies to a point where they can just be functional as a human being, start to slowly develop and embrace the white belt mentality. Guess what? I come back to it all the time. Skills atrophy, they go away. They can be redeveloped and honed, and we have to find ways to do that to make them, something that we still own. Right? They may be rusty, they may be dusty, but hey, we can get them ready again. I urge folks, take care of your body first, because your body drives everything. Last little plug I'll get in here, Marine Corps thing. The Marine Corps started their martial arts program, I think, back right around 2003 or 4. So maybe right before, maybe it was around 9/11. I don't know. But they have a saying: one mind, any weapon. And that's the right way to think about it, right? If you got the right mindset to be combative or get yourself to safety, I mean, that could be a form of it too. Not everything needs to end in a lethal encounter. If you've got that mentality, you're probably going to be successful, but your mind starts everything first.
All right, give me a second here. Bringing it back over. I'm trying to write down a little note here. Here's a question before we kind of go over to David. What are your guys' thoughts? So as we go forward into next year and we start doing these, having a little bit more fun, having a drink, longer form live streams, right? Where there's no one set comment. I almost want to kind of throw this out there as one of the first ones that we do. So Redbeard, I'm throwing it to you, you know, for your permissions, but Patrick just kind of got me thinking about that, because there's so much to this conversation and we're trying to keep it to an hour and a half here. You know, I mean, so Patrick, maybe even want to weigh in that as well, because I already wrote 3 notes down from everything you just said there. I mean, like, I could sit and talk to you for the next 30 minutes about just 3 things of all the things you said that I think are so important. So for everybody watching or listening, again, go back and rewind everything Patrick just said and let that sink in, and let that, like, let your heart and your mind, and then let every fiber of your being absorb that. Because you know, if somebody was to argue with what Patrick just said, I'd be like, well, you're just arguing for the sake of arguing. Like, he's right on so many fundamental levels. Now, whether you want to tweak it a little bit here or you want to do it a little bit differently, it doesn't matter. But the fundamental concept is that's it right there. So before we go over to DB, what do you guys think? Should that be, or is that interesting enough of a subject? And for you, the viewer, leave a comment below. If you guys think this is boring or whatever, then we won't do that. But also for you guys, I think that should be one of the long form live streams. And if people want to ask questions, then they could be like, Patrick, what about this? Oh, okay, then chime in. Mark, what about this? You know, blah, blah, blah. David, what about that? I mean, it depends who's there on the live stream, but I kind of like that idea. And I'm really throwing that out there, especially because of what you just said, Patrick. So before we go to DB, what do you guys think? Does that sound stupid, or is that maybe something that worth considering? Anybody chime in?
Absolutely.
I think it'd be something worth considering. So.
All right, that's a Redbeard.
David?
Yeah,
I think it would be fun to do that, because it'd be good to, you know, answer people's questions, because they may, you know, everybody's got, you know, some kind of limiting factor, or, hey, exactly what do you mean by that? That way we could address it right on the spot.
Well,
you know?
and that's what I'm saying, because I know you and I've been around you, like, so I know a lot of what you're saying that you're just not even thinking about the talking about what's behind that. I think to flesh that out more, I think that would be a really good, I personally think that would be a good podcast, Patrick. So I guess that was my weird way of saying, like, if you ever have a Friday night in 2024 and we're not dead as a species, we're still alive as a country, and we can communicate, I would like to make that one of our first live streams. And then that's what we just sit and talk about. It's just exactly this whole thing about the physicality but the mental side of it, and how that applies to what you are or are not going to realistically be able to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Before I turn it over to David, the things that you can't do, dude, then you just know where you're not going to squander any more time. Like, hey, I can't do that. I can't use, again, training weapon, but it's a simulated, you know, semi-auto. Hey, I can't rack the slide. No matter how I manipulate the slide, I can't do it. Well, guess what you just learned? You need to go to a wheel gun or to a shotgun or some other platform or some other. And Patrick, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm rambling now, but dude, how many times have you and I talked about, like, you know, people go to this tool when this tool is the tool they should have went to first because of proximity and the situation and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. Absolutely. Well, on top of it, you know, just the fact that you've got that, and I've got, you know, some of those out in, you know, my little training area. The people that say, oh, I can't get to the range. It's been a long time since I've been to the range. Well, you know what? You can do that, you know, at home all the time. You know, you've got an inert weapon. Even if you've got a live weapon, as long as you make it safe, you can dry fire and present, you know, all day long, and you can get really comfortable doing it from different positions. That puts you head and shoulders above a lot of folks in a realistic situation without even having fired a round. Now, eventually you need to get to a range to fire the rounds, to feel the recoil and you know, run the trigger and get the feel for that. But yeah, I mean,
and to see if you're actually
you can do. These are practical things that you can do on a daily basis.
Hey, and before I come, David, one last thing, because Patrick just said this, and this is what I like. So, Redbeard, if you don't mind, I'm not throwing you under the bus, but it's a great example to what Patrick just said. And we're about to talk about the home. And this is where I want to bring it over to David. I think this is one of David's, you know, one of his strengths, right? His wheelhouse. you know, the house, the family, and how your mindset is, and how you're enveloping all that. But what was this, Redbeard? A week ago, 2 weeks ago, we were hanging out. You came over and brought me that awesome sandwich from, what is that place in Duluth?
Social House.
Social House. Social House. If you guys ever see this video, you got to bring back that chicken wrap sandwich. Holy shit, that was a good sandwich. Jeremy treated me well. But as Jeremy was leaving but as Jeremy was leaving, we were just talking, and because we're guys, this stuff came out. And Jeremy, if you remember, to Patrick's point, we were talking about how you physically maneuver, how you do some things. And to Patrick's point, we weren't on the range. We weren't expending live ammo. And we were just out of nowhere. Then there was a conversation. Well, how would you do this? How would you deal with that? And like Jeremy was, and I'm not saying Jeremy was wrong. I just presented Jeremy with like, well, here's another way you could possibly do it. That was
a better way of doing something.
Well, better depends on the person, right? But if you can't physically maneuver and do that, well, then it's not better, right? But it was just another way of looking at a situation, looking at a mathematical equation. Well, how do I solve the equation, right? Well, I could either present and put my, half of my body out by maintaining my right hand grip, or I could shuffle my feet, readjust my stance, transfer into my left hand, and now only like a third of my body is being, exposed for, counter fire. But that's not going to work for everybody. To Patrick's point is what I'm kind of getting at. So there's a huge part of this that has. Well, okay, we're coming back into the house, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of like sidetracking this, but I do see again. I don't know if it's two separate things, the mind and the body. I don't know if they're separate. I think they have to be in really good unison to truly be as effective as you possibly can.
It's got to be a symbiosis to it.
Patrick, would you disagree with that, or before I turn it over to David, because I don't want to like slander you or make it seem like we're disagreeing.
No,
with you.
No. I don't take it that way.
What are your thoughts?
No, I don't take it that way, but I do think that like everything that you've ever done in a break contact drill, a CQB drill, anything like that, you're always looking, and you have to make these little decisions in a really short space of time. Sometimes with a lot of stimulus overload, which is by design. So even in real life setting, something happening, maybe out in public, maybe, if it's on your house and your property, what have you, you still got to make that decision to do it. The physical piece, that's where actually, going through those repetitions, as you say these things, your body starts to respond. I don't believe in the, what's it called? The, muscle memory, because muscles don't have memory. But I do believe in building motor pathways and having cues that you give yourself to do. And I would say that this is also something very similar to sports, right? Like, when the ball snaps, the guys aren't jumping, off their bodies aren't just like moving. They know they're waiting for that little motion. They're looking for that little micro movement or something that says, hey, this is about to happen before I'm talking about the defenders, but they start jumping and moving. Right. This is just human nature. So having everything dialed in is huge. I'll throw one more little nugget in here. So there's something called Hicks' Law. And we talk about this in a lot of the training that I do with folks. But Hicks' Law says that if you've got one stimulus and only one response, the time between those two is pretty short. But if you've got, two possible responses to a stimulus, now your brain has to cycle through, hey, which one of these am I choosing? 3, that makes it worse, right? 4, it gets crazy. So the concept that a lot of people use in the law enforcement realm that I it bothers me is, oh, it's another tool in your toolbox. Well, I don't want another tool in my toolbox. I want to know, I want commonality between all of them so that I only have to make a micro choice, but my response can be a lot faster. All that's done up here.
And that's a great point. And as I bring it over to David, because I think the point as it pertains to like where I think David and his background and a lot of his, more recent background is, to your point, to overcome that and to be able to manage those responses and know which responses to ignore and how to process that. That takes a lot of time and a lot of training. Look, fighter pilots can do fine motor skills under tons of stress because of all the training and all the opportunities they've had. That's not what most of us are going to go through. Most of us are just mom and dad, mom, pa, normal folk, right? And so we've got to figure out then, in my humble opinion, and Patrick, I know you'll get this because this is a training thing. It's like you've got limited resources, limited opportunities. So you got to focus on the things that are really going to matter, right? I don't have $1 million to train you to defend your family or to defend your house, but I've got $1 million to spend on you because you're flying a $100 million aircraft, right? So see, that's economics. Like, yeah, that's worth my, that is a good return on my investment. I'll spend, $400,000 training this pilot to fly this $30 million aircraft. That's worth it because you need to, because you want to bring that $30 million aircraft back. But David, how do we dumb this down? And how do we get this to the mom and pa, the normal person can defend their family, can defend their house? How do we make that connection then, sir?
So but sound mind, sound body. It's goes back to my college days, the fraternity I was in, Sigma Phi Epsilon. They had this entire balanced man going after like the Greek ideal. But in the college setting, they're concerned about, when it comes to sound mind, they're thinking about academically, right? We're in college for a reason. Sound mind's going to help us in that endeavor. And then sound body, it's when we're in college, we're in athletic competition, intramurals. It's just part of that Greek ideal, right? So that sound mind, sound body is a philosophy it's evolved in my world to less about the academic and athletic environment, but the world I live in is more family oriented. It's more my wife and my two boys, and how do I adapt that mentality, sound mind, sound body to that? We good?
I just got a quick question. Did you have that before I met you in the agency, or is that an evolution from your time in the agency and where you are now in life? I'm just curious.
So before the agency, that's where I learned about the sound mind, sound body, balanced man, Greek ideal. And then as I've, that whole world has always been inside me, that fraternity world. I spent 4 years highly involved in that Greek life world. It was amazing. I mean, it's fraternity. It's the best. It's a bunch of dudes learning how to depend on each other. And
Mark Wahlberg just said the same thing when he took his kid, when he was at his kid's fraternity for a party, I guess last week. Anyway, I know that's a stupid sidebar, but yeah.
I think fraternities offer so much that's right for society, and unfortunately so much that's wrong. And I think, not to get sidetracked, but taking that sound mind, sound body ideal into my personal life, where I've evolved it to be more mental and physical resilience for sound mind, sound body. And that's something I have to teach my kids, and something I work with them, because I got to teach them I'm not raising 2 little boys. I'm raising potentially 2 men, and getting them to be mentally, prepared for this world and physically prepared for this world it consumes my time. As you know, that's a big part of what my schedule is. It's sports. And sports is how we teach our children about sound mind, sound body, and those ideals that I spent my time in college learning about. And it's just a concept that, like I said, my MO is to do what I can to not just protect my family immediately, but give them the tools that could protect themselves as well. And that's the whole point of training. That's the whole point of training from the agency, military, law enforcement, whatever it is. It isn't just to be singular minded to protect in the event, but to pass on certain skills to make sure people can protect themselves as well. So no one's always dependent on others. They're dependent on them, on themselves. So, but with the kids, not to ramble too much about it, that sound mind is the harder skill to train. Sound body, getting them out, throwing a football, throwing a baseball, hitting in the cage, hitting off the tee, whatever it is. That's easy. Every kid wakes up and they want to go hit something. That's, I mean, how awesome is that, right? That's what you live for. But getting that sound mind refined and sharpened is the hard part. And as much as travel baseball, I think, is an evil in the society for other reasons, we're heavily involved. And sometimes it means my boys are playing in the super hot summer, freezing winter, where it's completely miserable. It might be raining a little bit or snowing a little bit, or it's the worst conditions possible. We shouldn't be playing football or baseball in these conditions. These little kids shouldn't. And this is kind of where I part ways with a lot of my fellow parents. I see it as an opportunity for my kids to get tougher, right? They go through that environment and they come out better for it. They know, hey, I just played 2 baseball games in the miserable cold and I loved every second of it. And I know that they could handle that in the future. And I know that's just a small part of the world that we're in, but it's going to give them the skills of resiliency later in life, that mental resiliency. And that's why I do what I do for my kids. You're muted, Mark.
There, I thought I did a better job this time, but apparently I did it. Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I love what you said, because at the end of the day, it isn't about, I mean, there is a part of it. So you, the parent, realizes that your kid, but it's for the child to realize. And it's the same for a soldier, anybody in any type of environment. It's like, oh, okay, I thought this was going to suck, but guess what? It did suck and I'm not dead. So it helps, just like pump it, lifting weights. Dude, I can do another 10 pounds. I can do, and then you 10 pounds. And then a month later, like throw on another 25, like you just get better. So you're like, and again, Patrick, I got to come to you because, again, no offense to somebody else, but no, I will say this. David's been in some hardship situations that, and I was like, and it isn't just like the food sucks. It's like people are trying to kill us. But Patrick, you know what I'm talking about, because like that's the whole goal of military training. It's to get you to realize that you're going to be okay. Like physically and mentally. Oh my God, I don't think I can do that. What just flashed into my mind is how many soldiers I've put off rappel towers. I can't do this. I can't do this. Yeah, you can. And you're not, and you're going to be okay. You've got this mental hurdle that you are somehow just not willing to overcome. But then once with the proper training or the proper instruction or the proper, whatever it is, you suddenly realize like, oh, I can do this all day long. And then that person next thing, 3 rappels later, they want to go Australian. Or to what David's talking about, like, oh, I can't do this. And you're like, dude, I want it to be snowing because my team is going to kick your ass in the snow because we train and live in the snow. David, I see, I'm going to come to you. You know what I'm talking about.
You brought up exactly a situation that happened. We went during COVID because California and Nevada were shut down during COVID. Don't get me started. So we had to go to Oregon of all places. So Oregon's a little bit different. Southern Oregon's like Trump country. The rest of Oregon is like communist. But so we took the boys to a baseball tournament in Southern Oregon. It's freezing cold. I can't remember what month it is. It's always cold somewhere, but freezing cold. And we're playing a team from the Bay Area. So it gets cold there, but not frigid cold. And they were good. They're legit good. This amazing. And they still beat our boys, but only by a run or two because they couldn't handle the cold. And our boys were just, whatever, it's freezing. They just go hit.
Yep.
And the parents were tougher. We're sitting there, we're bundled. We know what we're in for. And all you could hear is the other team complaining about how cold it was, how miserable it was. And they're just physically so much superior at baseball that they happened to win, but they did not blow the kids out like they should have. And it's purely because they mentally could not play that game that day. And it was a great example of what value I'm finding with my kids going through these miserable experiences. Yeah, I mean, common sense in the back of my head says they shouldn't be playing baseball in this. No one, if pros don't play baseball in this, these 10-year-old kids shouldn't, or 12-year-olds, 14 now, but or if this blistering heat, whatever it is. But the reality is they're not there to just play a game. They're there to adapt to the real world, to learn life skills, to build that mental resiliency. So they know they could overcome anything, no matter how uncomfortable, how miserable, and how impossible it seems. And that, I think, is the most important thing that my kids are learning in sports, is just how to prepare themselves for the real world, where it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be miserable. And you know what? The tougher the ones who are going to survive, the ones who embrace the suck, the ones who say, you know what? I love the journey more than the destination. And that's why I'm so passionate about this subject when it comes to, you know, how my family is, how we're raising my wife and I are raising our boys, and we're both on the same page. Like, yeah, this sucks. Come on. I don't want to be out in the freaking freezing cold snow. It's miserable. I'm sitting there, not even playing, but I know, and my wife knows, that there's a certain value added for our sacrifice to sit there and watch. One, I get to watch my little boys play, but they're learning something. They're tougher for it.
But don't forget, it's also the mental side of it. So your kids are like, yeah, and there's my parents right there. Like, it sucks down here for me playing football, but at least I'm doing physical activity. They're just sitting up there, and I'm not sure if dad snuck in a little, like, hot toddy, but they're just up there in the stands, not moving around, and it sucks. But at least I'm down here, like, moving and doing stuff. So there's even that little mental story or mental, Patrick, what am I looking for here? It's an example. It's there's another way of saying it, but it's still giving them something to look up to and grasp. And through the individual's mind, they're like, okay, it sucks to be me right now. But what about the person who's not even down here, and they're sucking it up and they're suffering through this as well? There's some other little dynamic right there, and it goes into the mental resiliency. And Patrick, that's why I was bringing it to you, because I know you've got a lot of background and actual training and real world experience when it comes to resiliency. So, makes sense. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah,
I know you want to add to that.
Yeah. So first off, I mean, that's exactly right. And as Dave was talking about that stuff, all I could think of is all the moments that, I was, under a log or in the middle of a rainstorm, or, sleeping in a little snow cave that I had to build because there was a blizzard coming, and I was supposed to be, moving, cross country for extreme distances, crazy stuff. You're right. The military is very good at exposing people to that. And I think the term that they like to throw out there is stress inoculation, right? So you're getting slowly, you're maybe not sometimes slowly, but you're getting exposed to amounts of stress, whether it's, weather conditions, whether it's lack of food, whether it's lack of sleep, whether it's just like increasing weight. All these things add up. Well, after a while, when you realize, hey, guess what? This stuff doesn't break me. It kind of makes you start to think, well, what does break me? How far can I go if I really need to? Because there's always that leaving a little bit in the tank, right? So, what if I just absolutely had to empty the tank? What could happen? So that's one of the things that we get exposed to really well. I want to step back, go back to like Mark's comment about the $30+ million aircraft, and why the aviators get all the training and exposure to save that money. Think about this. This might be a why type situation for folks who don't have that background or that experience, which is fine. But having the why is essential. And it's like, how much is your family worth? Because that aircraft, that can be replaced. Yeah, it's going to be expensive. It's taxpayer money, but you can't replace, your family. You can't replace you. So that's another, argument to start saying, hey, let me take my physical health, seriously. Let me start developing skills. And again, having the white belt mentality and seeking out the right people that can train this stuff in an empowering and effective way. That's essential. So, sniff people out. If, you find an instructor, who's not solely focused on making you better at a specific thing, move on. I mean, there's plenty of them out there. I mean, we had 20 plus years in the global war on terror. There's so many people with great experience. But you don't want somebody who all they're going to do is tell you their war stories and how awesome they were. That's not going to help you, right? So it's all about empowering you and developing, effective skills in a functional way that you can draw on, if needed. So, but yeah, and back to the developing the kids. I mean, that's literally, you're leading by example when you're taking them there and you're exposing them to that stuff. And I think a lot of people are hesitant to do that. Most likely, in my opinion, it would be that they're uncomfortable in that setting. So, yeah, I mean, selfless service was one of the hallmarks that we used to be judged on, right? So that's a great example from a parental standpoint.
You're muted, Mark.
I thought I had that all figured out this time, but I guess this episode is Mark is never going to unmute before I start talking. But hey, Patrick, that was a great point, and I'm glad you just said it that way. That was pretty awesome. DB, I'm going to bring it back to you because I think some of the things Patrick was just saying kind of tie into your previous points. Do you want to add to that? I think I see a way it dovetails. Are you picking that up? Do you want to go for that?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
With you and your new blue light behind you? I mean,
yeah, I'm trying to fix the lights in my room.
No, it looks pretty good. Just roll with it. You look pretty badass, dude.
My whole house is on.
I feel like I should start playing some techno music. So I like it.
My whole house is on an app, and I'm choking right now when I'm trying to fix it. So, but we're gonna go with the blue.
Go with the blue. It looks pretty badass, dude. Just go with it.
So the stress inoculation brings up another thing that my wife and I spend a lot of energy on is artificial adversity. So I grew up on the not wealthy side of town, very blue collar, very paycheck to paycheck. Dad worked 2 jobs, mom worked 2 jobs. Like everybody was working. That's just how we went through. So the adversity I went through, I think, has prepared me for the life that I ended up getting to live. And for overcoming that world that I came from, my children aren't going to have to ever worry about, whether their parents have that paycheck or money or extra things. So we have to create adversity in a different way. And my wife and I, we like to talk about it as we call it artificial adversity. And it goes back to those baseball games in the cold, those miserable football games, any other opportunity for our boys to overcome challenges in our demographic. We're kind of forced to artificially create adversity because my kids they're not going to go without in the same way that I had to, that same way that gave me the ability to operate in the real world. It gave me the skills to overcome. Right. And so we have to create that artificial adversity for them to better develop into the men that we need them to become. And I love the stress inoculation term, and everything comes down to, it's that mental resilience. It's all that same theme, but it's something my wife and I are passionate about because those are the things that we have to teach our children that people aren't good at. Everyone's good at teaching their children the athletic side or, how to hit a baseball, but the mental toughness is where I think everyone's failing. And that's where you get into the real world. You get a job and your boss chews you out. I don't think bosses are allowed to chew people out these days, but you know what I mean? Or whether it's the drill sergeant, I don't think they're allowed to chew people out either, but you get my point, right? Like the real world's not so nice. And that's kind of what we got to teach them, how to handle pressure, handle rougher environments, uncomfortable situations, and come out better for it. So that's all I had to add on that one. You're muted, Mark.
Jesus F, dude, this is like
a rough go for you. This
is my worst podcast. You know what? I'm not going to mute it ever again. And if you guys hear me cough or sneeze or whatever, I just don't care anymore. I'm done with the mute button on my side because I'm trying to. And look, I probably didn't see it because I was just typing in the private chat, so whatever. But and then I'm thinking about what I'm doing next. No, David, you should go back to blue. The blue is awesome. Go back to blue, sir.
That took me forever to figure out. This is ridiculous.
You should go back to blue. But no, Patrick, I want to bring this back over to you on a serious note. That whole, like David's whole point about that kind of stress inoculation, and then creating it when your world doesn't provide it. I think there's a good thing for that, because again, ladies and gentlemen, if somebody was thinking we were going to sit and do a podcast and we're going to teach you how to, grip a handgun or do that's not the point, because I think the larger point is what David was just talking about. It's like, we're just trying to give you like life lessons and clues and experiences to how to make, if you're going to operate this thing right here, which I personally think is one of the most difficult weapons platforms to ever run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, you really got to practice, and you've really got to do this, even this right here, or even just sitting in. So Patrick, you kind of see where I'm kind of going with David's point of stress inoculation stress inoculation is one thing, but what was the other term you used, David? You called it like
artificial adversity.
Artificial adversity. Dude, I love that right there. I love that artificial adversity. Patrick, I think you've got some things to add on that artificial adversity. What do you got, sir?
Yeah, I think those kind of go in the same bucket. But ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to induce some type of adversity, right? Whether it's, I mean, it comes from all over the place, right? It's not all just a physical thing either, right? I mean, we've got that, in our professions, we've got this in relationships, these types of things, right? And I would say that, for me personally, anybody that I've, had like, an adverse situation with, either I've completely cut you loose because we just are not going to mix, or I'm like really close to you because that garnered some respect. And strangely enough, I think you and I started off like that, Mark. I remember when I first met you, you were a former enlisted guy that went on the officer side, and you came in like, piss and vinegar. And I was like, who's this fucking guy, this officer, yada, yada, yada. Right. And I think that the very first time I showed up, you gave me some attitude. I think I was late because I was on sleep meds. I missed PT. I was 5 minutes late. So you started busting my balls. And I'm like, hey man, I'm one of the performers. Like, why is this guy coming after me? So then after we kind of got to know each other, I'm like, oh no, this guy's totally legit. So, and then hence the relationship kind of kicked off from there. Right. But adversity in anything is phenomenal. I mean, I'm still in contact with guys that, I met and went through hard stuff back in like, the early 90s. So it's amazing how this works in all aspects of life. Right. So going back to kind of like the why behind people, starting to adopt this stuff, the tactics and all that stuff. And guess what? That's the easy part. If you don't have the why and you don't have like the desire to improve yourself and put yourself through some, adversity on your own, whether that be working out, whether that be, stop eating as much, maybe stop watching TV and engage more with people around you, that type of stuff. These are little things, but they're little victories that you can stack up, and eventually, it's going to pay off, right? Because last I heard, I mean, I don't know if anybody, actually won awards for watching more TV shows or, eating more, donuts, or I don't know. I mean, you see where I'm going with that stuff.
Well, actually, I think there are people who do win awards for eating
competitive
hot dogs and stuff. Whatever.
Yeah, Joey Chestnut. I take it back.
I just got to throw this out there. First time tonight, I actually unmuted myself before.
All right.
Talking, so
Congratulations, Mark.
Hey, but we're kind of wrapping this up. I just want to point out two things that you just said, Patrick. Well, you said a lot of things that I really like, but something I just want to kind of point out to everybody as we move forward, right? So I heard this from an individual who is way smarter than me, who had way more experience than me, and Patrick just said it as well. And I want to kind of hit that nail one more time with a giant hammer. Dude, teaching people how to shoot, that's not the difficult thing. It's teaching people how to think. That's the difficult thing. So when we started this episode, we wanted to talk about some of the more physical or kinetic side. And look what just happened. We just spent the whole podcast really talking about the mental and physical side. We didn't really talk about actually any skills. We didn't talk about you should do this or you should do that. Because I think each and every one of us at some level, what we really wanted to talk about is like, you got to be physically fit and you've got to be mentally fit. That trumps everything.
Yep.
Great. You could sit there and be the world's best, person with this platform or this tool right here. But if you can't walk from here to the end of the hallway or 15 miles with 80, then what does it matter? Right. Because that's the real world that you're going to encounter.
Yep.
It's going to be much more complicated than I'm just at the range. And I think Patrick, you said this, like, or maybe it was David. Actually it was David. No, it was you. You were talking about all the guys, the big talker, Betty Crockers. I'm at the range and I can do all kinds of awesome things at the range. Well, that guy can't run 3 miles. So all that awesome stuff at the range, it could still have benefit if he was in that static environment and he had all the time to get prepared and be ready for it. But boys and girls, is that reality? No, you're going to have to move. It's going to come when you least expect it, when you're not ready for it. As Patrick and I were talking about, we both, and actually everybody here, all 4 of us, and as well. Whenever something bad happens, it's when you're miserable, you're sick, you're out camping and the tent is leaking, and then something else happens. Shit happens when shit is already happening. So you've got to be prepared mentally and physically for those type of conditions. Boys, I got to turn this over to Redbeard because he's been absent for a little bit, but Patrick, DB, what are you guys' thoughts on that? Again, we didn't talk about hands-on stuff. David, we were going to sit and talk about surveillance detection and home defense. Maybe that just has to be another podcast. I'm serious. Maybe and I'm turning this over to Redbeard. Maybe that actually is how we need to do this going forward in 2024, because we really can't have these conversations with this many of us. Otherwise, this is going to be a 3-hour conversation before we can actually get to that meat of it. Maybe we need to bring David on as a subject matter expert and we talk about home defense. Maybe we bring Patrick on as a subject matter expert. So boys and girls, I'm saying that a couple times because we just call them SMEs, right? An SME, a SME, a subject matter expert. But maybe we bring Patrick on and we talk about physical fitness and some other aspect of, honestly, but I want to bring both these guys on and talk about a whole bunch of other shit. But
I think this went exactly how it should go at the start, because everybody who's watching already is practicing a lot of the things that I could talk about. Maybe not the specifics of surveillance detection, but home defense or handling weapons, or that a lot of people watching already. And that's kind of goes back to my very first point. They already do that part. It's the mental side. It's the walking the walk side. It's, preparing physically fit, being able to take care of your body trumps being able to shoot that gun at some point, at some level, right? One comes before the other if you want the other to actually matter. And I think the podcast went exactly how us as professionals or people who've done this in their previous lives or in our current lives, this is how we approach those skills. Before I talk about surveillance detection, I want to make sure we're all on the same page mentally and physically, because if you can't mentally handle the fact that someone might be behind you or behind your wife, as the case more likely would be, right? If you can't mentally handle that and you can't physically do something about it if it became an issue, who cares if they're behind you? Who gives a shit? It doesn't matter at that point. You can't do anything about it if you mentally shut down, if you freeze, right? And that's part of the mental preparation is you're not able to handle the stress, the adversity, any of that. You shut down, you freeze, you panic, you don't know what to do. So cool. You read my guide on surveillance detection. That's fantastic. What did you do to prepare yourself to be able to employ those tactics? And I think that's why this podcast went this way, because in all of our lives and the worlds we live in, that's what we do first. You don't just go out there and check your mirrors. There's a lot that happens before that.
Yeah.
Hey, Patrick, bringing that back over to you. So what do you think? Physical fitness, does that help you better deal with stress, or is that like a negative thing, or is it neutral?
I'd say 100% it's a positive. It's a positive attribute because, when your body undergoes stress, the more conditioned you are just, in a holistic health manner. Again, kind of going back to what Redbeard said, you don't need to be a bodybuilder. I also don't need to be a marathon runner. I just need to be capable over, kind of like a full spectrum. I don't need to be a specialist in any one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Your body's going to respond better. Going back to what DB was mentioning, something that came to mind is like if you have training or you've prepared yourself, right? You've got some resiliency. You've been exposed to adversity. You've done something to prepare yourself for, something possibly going sideways. It kind of generally falls into one of two categories, your thought process. I'm either going to be threatened because I don't have anything that I can bring to bear. Hey, I guess what I found, there's some of these people are following us. Oh shit. If I don't have anything to bring to bear, then, I'm more concerned about what they're going to do to me. If compared to if I'm challenged, now it's like, hey, this is the moment that all that time and energy that I've spent, training my body to be physically fit. I've, practiced some dry fire. I know how to use my vehicle in an offensive way. That's where it's like, okay, now the challenge begins. I'm thinking about what my options are compared to what they're doing. Right. So, but it's more empowering. So that's really what, if you go into the OODA loop, that's why people freeze because they don't know what to do. And they're kind of like caught between that, the decision and act because they're more concerned about what is that person going to do. So they've given that person the psychological capital to do whatever they want to, because they're not really on their own side, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, no, it makes all the sense in the world. You're already behind the power curve. You're already behind the 8 ball at that point in time. Yeah, you're flat on your feet. Hey, fellas, we're trying the new system. We're already at an hour and 40. God, I want to sit and keep talking. This is such an important subject, and I think, again, more importantly than trying to teach somebody how to establish a proper grip is to establish the proper mindset and the physical capability to even do that. And that's where we went with this podcast. But I think in the spirit of trying to go to where we're going to go for next year, I think we just need to do this on another occasion, because I know I got to give Redbeard some. Redbeard's been just. I've seen him when I bring you guys up full screen. I can see him. He's doing stuff. I know he's got some shit to say. And then, this is going to go just a little bit longer. But if you guys are okay with it, I just got to household 6. Well, we can't interfere with household 6. So on that note, that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Household 6 says we got to wrap this up. So let's bring it over to Redbeard for his comments. And then Redbeard, once you're done with your comments, don't do the outro. Give everybody a final chance for the last little, just 1 minute, type of responses. Then you do the outro. Okay. Sound good?
Yeah.
Boys, you okay with that? Everybody okay with that? David, you got to do the blue light. The blue light is so much better, dude. Seriously.
I watched The Matrix with the entire room green. It was epic. It
hang on. Is marijuana legal in your state? Are you watch The Matrix in a green room? Are you smoking a little?
So the green the Matrix green, right? Like that's
yeah.
We matched it. Oh my God, I don't know why we're talking about it in a podcast, but we matched it with these fancy lights and watched the movie, and it put you in a different mindset. It was awesome. It was good stuff.
So for anyone watching or listening this, we are not advocating the use of legal marijuana, green lights, and the Matrix movies. We are not espousing any of that.
Hey,
David might, but we are not.
I will
All right,
just
let's
say,
bring it over to Redbeard. All right, Redbeard, give us your comments, and then we'll let everybody get their last responses, and then you take us out, sir.
well, I also have to go somewhat different of Mark's take. I don't really give a shit what you do as long as you do it on your own time and in a safe space. And that's all I have to say about that. Have the time of your life. The other thing is I have to kind of make some fun at the end here of we've all met that one guy that's just like, I'll never have to run because I'll have all of the ammo and all the guns in the world, and I'll just roost up in this one spot and it'll be perfectly fine. But
sorry, that's why I don't play with it.
But it's like we all know that one guy that's just like, no, yeah, I'm not a runner. Like, there's no reason I'll have to run. It's like, there's lots of reasons you'll have to run, homie. Like, I don't know if you know this, but if you can't at least run a somewhat of a distance, like, you're already at a disadvantage. Like, it's fairly presumptuous to assume that you wouldn't be, in an unnecessary spotlight, as exampled by the riots in Minnesota. That's what they were. They weren't protests, they were riots. But on a different note, though, on a more serious note, one of my big takeaways is, in the end of the day, like, if you can take something that's otherwise like scary to you, or like you have a fear, like rappelling. Mark brought a great point up about rappelling. It's one of numerous things. If you can take something like rappelling or learning how to bushcraft camp or whatever, and you can just make it like a mild inconvenience to you, dude, you've won a huge battle right there. Because you're not only not worried about it, but you're just like, I don't really like doing this, but I'm going to do it. And the faster I do it, the quicker I'll get done with it. And if you can get something out of it, like, great. That's one thing that I think if people can do that switch around, you're going to have a little bit more comfort in your life. One final thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to you guys for the wrap up here. But if and whenever you have the possibility, there's a lot of people that they love this idea of being this lone, unit of a person that's just perfect at everything. It's never going to happen. Do what you can to foster and find a team environment, because you're not going to be good at everything. There's guys that are going to be way better at you than a lot of different things. And there's women that are going to be a lot better.
And no matter how cool you think you are, there's going to be somebody who's better at it than you. Yeah.
Right. And it's, yeah. And so look, like, I'm huge about a team environment. Like, you'll die a lot quicker alone. You'll die less quick in a team environment. Mostly because you can bring a lot of experience and a lot of different things that people have to share together, and then you become twice as formidable.
Just on a real selfish personal note, like, for people who've watched the podcast, like David's talked about our mutual experiences. David just did just as much to keep me alive as I did to keep him alive.
Right.
That's just how that's how it works. Period. Patrick doesn't know this, but actually Patrick does know this. But in the environment where we were with each other, dude, there wasn't me. No, it was all of us keeping each other alive. And I think what I really like about this podcast, how it went off a little bit off the rails, but in its own direction, and maybe for the right reasons. You're not going to do this by yourself. You've got to, but you have an obligation. You've got to be physically fit and mentally fit. Otherwise, you're not going to be good to the team, and it's the team that's going to keep everybody alive. That's my.
And that being said, like, be obviously the best version of you that you can be, but ultimately, like, having a team environment is just going to exponentially just drive you a lot farther. So that's my big takeaway. I really like the direction we went tonight, and I'm going to yield my time over to you guys, and then we'll and I'm sorry, I'm going to take charge. But let's just wrap this up, and we'll come back to you in a second here for the outro. But to everybody involved, I really do, and Jeremy,
as I propose this to Patrick and DB, tell me what your thoughts are. But this is why I like doing the 30-minute videos going forward, because David didn't get a chance to talk about some of the things that I'd prepped him. Like, hey, why don't you use your format, and your background?
It's a far better format in those 30 minutes.
Yeah, and it's the same with Patrick, who's right below me in Hollywood Squares. Dude, there's things that Patrick wants to, like, why not figure out and we didn't get to any of that stuff tonight. So I think I really like that format going forward because, if Patrick says, hey, I've got time on Wednesday. Okay, well, let's record the video on Wednesday and then release it on Saturday or whatever, and same with David. Like, hey, I've got time. And I personally really like this idea because I think both of these guys and all of our guests have so much to offer. I think we would, and it's no offense, don't anyone be offended here, but if we segregate that and like, it's just Patrick tonight, it's just David tonight, it's just Steven, whomever it is, or whoever the guest is, I think that gives that individual a chance, a better opportunity to get their point across. And we're not competing against, not competing, but like, I love this format where there's like, 3 to 5 of us. I think it's a lot of fun. I personally like it. Hey, for those watching and listening, if you don't like it, leave a comment below or tell us what you think. Yeah, multiple guests or no, just do the one guest. Let us know. We can do this differently. It's our podcast. We can come up with it because I'm here to tell you. So just right there. So not the top. That whole bottom of the page from right there down. Those are notes. I never even got a chance to even ask you guys questions. Some of those were for David. Some of those were for Patrick. And I hope everybody who's been watching this tonight has a whole bunch of notes and thoughts and comments that they've written down. And again, and if you are watching this or listening to this, leave a comment. Tell us what you think. How can we be better, or how can we address that if we don't know what your thoughts are? But I've already got like 6 different things we didn't even talk about that pertain to both these guys that I would like to talk about in the future. So anyway, that's my little comment right there. That's what I would like to see happening. Who wants to go first? David and Patrick, final comments, and then we're going to bring it over to Redbeard. David, your mic is unmuted, so you go first.
I don't have much to add other than, this is something I love. I've become more focused on it, knowing I have a responsibility to protect the loved ones in my family. And that's just my evolution as a man into a father and a husband and the responsibilities that I have. So it's just something I put a lot of energy into. I have a great partner in my wife that agrees with me on many of these things. I mean, we did develop all these concepts together through our conversations. We spend an hour a day walking. We go for a walk in the morning. We talk about those things. So that's how a lot of this gets developed. But other than that, that's just where I'm at. I have nothing more to add other than, that's it.
Yeah. I'll just say something on a personal note. I don't know your wife all that well. I mean, but your wife's rock solid motherfucker. I mean,
she just walked in too. So
seriously,
great timing.
That's awesome.
Some people are just born lucky, I guess.
Yep, there it is. That's you, dude. That's you. I still want one of those hats, Lauren. But all right, let's bring it over to Patrick. Enough kissing Lauren's butt here. All right, Patrick, your turn, sir.
All right, yeah, I'll finish up. So I think it was back around 2013, 14. I think when Mark was starting his company, I was still working at the agency, and we started to think about like, hey, what would be a really good logo or motto for the company, and what was decided on was keep thinking, keep moving, and never quit. And that was basically taken from both of our backgrounds. And the keep thinking, I would say, to anybody listening, keep thinking means, hey, keep thinking about, the reality of a situation. Keep thinking about like where you are in this situation, like taking stock in yourself, where your areas of improvement are, or, hey, what are your strengths, right? Is there something that am I focusing solely on strengths and, not paying attention to my weaknesses and bringing those up to strengths? I mean, that type of stuff, right? And then it was, keep moving forward in everything you're doing, and you're developing your skills, but also, keep your body moving, keep your body moving so that you're staying, in that state of readiness. Right. And again, this is not like everybody out listening to this should needs to jump into like some kind of like, special operations fitness thing. You just need to be functional. That's all. Just, mobile, be able to move. That's really it. And then finally, never quit. Like, don't get overwhelmed by anything and say, oh, well, I can't do that. Right. You can always do something. Whether, and that goes back to the thinking and the moving piece. Right. But it's don't quit. Don't give up on things. Give yourself credit for, your capabilities, and don't ever underestimate yourself. So, that's it. And then I'll finally end with my my line that I came up with a couple of weeks ago is like, hey, if you love America, I love you, because that's one of the things I think we're missing today. Is everybody's focusing on the division and the attempts to divide that are taking place. Don't let it happen. Bond with your fellow Americans, be a community, be part of a tribe, and just make each other better. And that's all I've got for tonight.
Dude, God bless you. I love that. If you love America, I love you. I think so. We'll have next year again. We're going to do this new format. You guys will both come on as part of the larger thing. Hopefully, if you're willing to do it again. But we're going to have you guys on as the subject matter expert for what it is that you want to focus on. It's your podcast in essence, and we just asked you a couple of questions. But Patrick, you just said it right there. It's like, come on, man. If you love America, I love you. I mean, that's I seriously just love that statement right there. Redbeard, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of competing with your outro. I love your outro, dude. Your outro always gets me a little choked up. I'm not even making that up. I'm an American. So what Patrick just said gets me choked up. Your outro gets me choked up. I mean, so all right, sir, it's your show. You take us out. This is outro, right?
Yep. Okay,
go ahead.
So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to Patrick and DB. You guys are awesome, and we really appreciate having you guys back again. It's been fun, and I really like the way in the direction that we went tonight, because I think when we talk about physicality and kinetic, it's quite honestly probably the most important subject out of all of it. Anybody can pick up a gun, but in the end of the day, when it comes down to it, if you can't move, really kind of sucks. If you can't think, it really kind of sucks. So that's the bigger component to all of this. So thank you guys very much for coming on, contributing. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you to every single person that we have that stops by and watches our episodes. We really, really appreciate it. We are going to work on really trying to get this thing down, this new format down, so that way we can deliver the best possible episodes that we can in the future. And we really look forward to seeing everybody in the new year. And hopefully you guys get a lot out of this next year as you did this year. So,
hey, just real quickly, and we're still working on it. Like, we failed again tonight, just like we did last, but we're getting better, and we'll get better going forward in the future. I mean, we will.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
hey, and last note though, if Jeremy's not going to say it because he's about to do his outro, I'll say it. Merry Christmas to everybody out there, and a Happy New Year to you and your families.
Yes.
Goodwill
Absolutely.
to all, and peace on earth, and goodwill to all men. Plain and simple.
Yep.
That's it right there.
I like it. And on that note,
Jeremy, take us out, sir.
The flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as there are good people that are willing to support and defend it. And that all starts with you guys. Like Mark says, you guys are the resistance. So you each have a responsibility to preserve and defend the republic that we have. I still believe it still exists. I still believe that it will exist. But we have a long road ahead of us, everybody. And that means that everybody has to get all hands on deck, and it starts within our families and in our communities. So on that note, Mark, that's where I'm going to end it. I hope everybody enjoyed this podcast. Thank you to our guests. And that's all I got.
We'll see you next time. Next week, live stream 29, tentatively 29 December. That should be Friday. We'll see what happens. But join us on the live stream. We'll have a lot of fun end of the year. Patrick, David, God bless you guys. As always, thank you for joining us. Redbeard, your outro always gets me a little bit choked up. I fucking love it. All right, everybody, be good. We'll see you next time. All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Or as Redbeard likes to say,
Toodles.